All right. Well, hi, Ron. Welcome and thanks for joining me here at Entrée Capital's Founder Spotlight series, where we highlight some of the inspiring founders in our portfolio and invite them to share some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. Are you ready to get started?
Ready to go.
Awesome. So let's first get to the basics. Tell us a little bit about who you are as Ron before we jump into empathy.
Sure thing. Ron Gura, father of two amazing daughters, husband to Michal, and co-founder and CEO here at Empathy. Enjoying Tel Aviv.
So what is empathy? It's such a powerful word, and I'm sure there's a lot behind it. Can you tell me a little bit about what empathy is?
So Empathy is a software company that is really that friend you wish you had when you lose a loved one. And we're handling the full range of estate and grief needs that a family is dealing with during some of life's most challenging moments.
And you obviously are in a really tough space when it comes to the meaning behind your company and building where you are right now. Tell us, I guess, what stage is Empathy currently in?
So we're 2 years old.
2 years old. And you have a full team, an office, you're in Israel, you're in New York, you're around the world. You've got incredible partnerships that I know have been growing, specifically some large ones with some insurance companies. Getting there obviously couldn't have been so easy. Can you tell me a little bit about, how did you get to where you are as a company? How did you figure out where your product market fit was? What is your product and how does it fit into the market?
Sure. So I'll kind of zoom out, break it down to a few questions. So just on the basics, we're 60 plus people between New York, Tel Aviv, and now a bunch of us in Scottsdale as well. And 2 years in, we've raised $48 million from amazing partners and working with really great enterprise companies like big employers and iconic life insurance carriers. And what's working best for us is that combination of dealing with grief and logistics at the same time, because we believe and we've learned through our product that grief is made hard by logistics and logistics are made so much harder by grief. So you can't really decouple the two. And the product that we've built is a result of that learning. It is a 50% headspace for grief and a 50% TurboTax for estate administration. It's about saving people time, money, but also stress.
Now, do you consider yourself, and I don't like asking people to put themselves in boxes per se, but would you consider yourself B2C? Would you consider yourself B2B2C? Would you consider yourself B2B? And then how has that definition changed over time as your company grew? And if it has changed, how did that change your business plan? How did that change where you're going to go or what your growth plans were?
So dealing with loss is an infrequent product. It's not TikTok, it's not Instagram, it's not even something you would do every month or thank God every year. It's closer to what a Zillow on Airbnb or a TurboTax would be. But when you need it, you need to have a brand that is top of mind. And very little brands today can do that successfully on a direct-to-consumer level, because the default would be today a subscription model of things when people want to be good at, like a Noon or a Headspace or Audible. Like, I want to be a better reader. I want to be a healthier person. I want to be stronger. I want to be good at playing piano with Simply and whatnot. Usually, not always, those would be subscription models where your CAC LTV needs to make sense. And for an infrequent product, it's very hard to align that with LTV, because you're not really looking for that type of engagement. You're looking for unbounded engagement where people need you for a week, then don't need you for a few months. Then they need you to help with probate and taxes. And then they don't need you again for a few weeks. And then they invite a family member who's also dealing with grief. And so that's the type of usage that we're looking for. And it's closer to those infrequent ones. And as a model, it will not be as lucrative to do it direct to consumer. We do have an angle that we make accessible for direct to consumer. And it's important for us from a mission standpoint as well, to be able to democratize access for grief, and same thing for estate administration, and help people regardless to where they are on the journey. But most of our success so far, at a very early stage still, is coming from unlocking asset retention and generation loyalty that is so important for these incumbents in the life insurance players. It's a unique category. If you think about life insurance, it's very unique. It's the only insurance that is not really, well, the claimant and the policyholder are not the same person. Unlike your car insurance, unlike your, house insurance.
Mhm.
So the satisfaction and experience of the beneficiary, the claimant, that adult child that is calling a life insurance company to say, where's my money? And, I just lost a loved one. That wasn't top of mind for the last 200 years. It was a cost center that's supposed to pay quickly, effectively, accurately, be gone. And we found a very unique opportunity there to do the right thing. We believe these values drive a lot of value.
Now, some of these, life insurance companies are, in my head at least, kind of old school, in theory, dated, and obviously they're modernizing over time. What are some, if you could share, some of the difficulties that you may have come upon, or that you think maybe even other founders that are looking to go into those kind of older, really embedded spaces when it came to bringing a startup into this, non-digital world per se? What are some of the things that were difficult and you had to overcome?
Some of those are very hyper local and specific to life insurance, and even specific to certain states. And insurance has a commissioner in every state.
Wow.
But some of those I think could be brought into more general lessons and insights about B2B and even B2G like operations, where you need to work with a large incumbent. When you think about some of the healthcare companies, Anthem and United, I think a lot of the healthcare industry, digital health innovators in the Israeli ecosystem and the US ecosystem is dealing with the same hurdles of going through compliance and extremely long, slow, non-responsive sales cycles. So these are the two kind of known ones. Everybody knows it takes time. Everyone thinks they can do it faster. Everyone has that self-assurance, which is key, to think, oh, I know it usually takes time, but I'll be on top of it and it will move. But these organizations are really not incentivized to take a lot of risk. They're profitable. They've been around for a while. They're large. And in the life insurance space, they're not even public. The vast majority of these companies are not even traded. These are mutuals for very specific entity model that is not common and pretty much probably not even known to most of your audience right now. And the shareholders of the company are the policyholders. So they're getting dividends, etc. It makes everything different from an incentive standpoint. If you work in an organization like that, you're pretty risk averse. And we find the innovators and advanced thinkers within those companies who want to change the existing just process about beneficiaries or policyholders, and you work with them. But definitely compliance and sales would be the more generic side of the insight. It takes time.
You mentioned that it would be finding that person and almost finding that champion within an organization. Do you have any tips or advice on how to find that right person? Because I think this is obviously, like you said, it's a problem that B2B companies will find often. And they always say, find your champion, but don't necessarily only rely on that champion, because that champion could, technically leave. So how did you approach that? And how did you solve that? And any thoughts on that space?
think a lot has been said about startups working with incumbents in different markets, and definitely the champion legend is out there, and definitely there's usually someone who's doing more than others. My prioritized advice would be, if I would say just one thing about champions is bet on one and don't move. So if you found your champion, stick to them. And someone else from the organization has a competing incentive or a different organization or subsidiary, and it's tempting to say, this is a very large company, 100,000 employees, 50,000 employees, been around for 50 years, 100 years. Some of our partners has been around for 200 years. It's okay if, we open a few angles, open a few doors. It's usually not a good idea. It's usually best to say, great, happy to talk. FYI, we're in discussions with, John. John's been leading this. And unless the champion says, Kevin is going to be your point of contact starting tomorrow, kind of stick to John, update that champion every meeting about other discussions you might be having within the company. So he or she are empowered, and you help them basically look good inside the organization. And if you don't do that, I feel like you're creating chaos. When I was on the other side working for Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies, I definitely didn't appreciate early stage startups who are wasting a lot of time within the organization. So they're getting a no, and they're just calling for that 45 minutes for another side of the ocean. Mm. And eventually it will go to the same place who originally said, no, thank you. If they're not even thoughtful about how to do it with a new angle. So stick to your champion.
Now, this is a totally out of the blue, I guess, kind of question. Empathy has won quite a few awards on app design. And it's interesting to think of in my head of a B2B company that has such an emphasis, and a beautiful emphasis, on really the user interface of something as simple as an app. Can you maybe go into a little bit about why is that so important to you? And again, I like kind of getting advice out of this. So like maybe also advice to other founders on how to prioritize the product, but also prioritize the UX, UI, and that element. Because I think it's an incredible aspect of empathy, is how beautiful you guys are.
Well, I think the design is a discipline and a tool to get somewhere, just like technology or content. And it really depends what you're trying to solve for. For us, design is incredibly important. I would say we're a design first company. Before we are a product team, an engineering team, a marketing team. It's a brand first company in a way, because you have to win the aversion. There is the strongest force in the end of life ecosystem is our own self chemistry that is avoiding from even contemplating our own self mortality. Nobody wants to think about the fact that if their dad passed away, they're next, etc. And we do have those life transitions happening in our life with newborns and parents and loss that doesn't skip any of us. So the first thing you need to do is find a way. This is not going to be a perky, fresh, fun, cool app, but it's going to be a messy, human, intuitive, and then empowering app that is actually going to save people time and money. So design has to be a central piece in that tone and voice that you create, especially because statistically speaking, people who are experiencing more loss are older. Thank God to medicine. People are no longer passing away because of, walking in the jungle and, an animal is killing them. It's age is the number one factor in mortality. So as a result, most of the bereaved families we're supporting are actually spouses, most cases, ladies who lost their husband, because of mortality rates and age difference, and also that cohort of basically baby boomers of today used to get married with quite of a big gap, year gap between the male and the female. So as a result, a lot of senior widows would use that app. It has to be extra simple and extra clear at a time that is already overwhelming, already confusing. People don't know what to do, what can wait. They have this maze of decisions. The last thing they need is another confusing element. So focusing on simplicity, in our case, that means about design, about font, about our content, about our approach, our CTAs, and we're very humbled that the team is getting the recognition they deserve from Apple Design Awards and Google Best App of the Year, etc. It's just table stakes for us in order to be able to work with families at all places and all ages, basically.
What surprised you most about building this company? It's not your first rodeo being in this space. What's something that you were shocked by, either good or bad?
I was very disappointed, at least until now, from the hospice industry in the US. A lot has been said about the healthcare system in the US, and specifically palliative care and comfort care in the US are in a very transactional space. We've met good people. We've met bereavement coordinators and chaplains and hospice owners who are really thoughtful about how they want to help families. But we also seen an industry that, since it's been commercialized, which is basically since the day Medicare started to reimburse hospices, and instead of a small segment that is mostly nonprofit, this is now a booming industry, which is mostly private equity and very acquisitive. Usually that could be a good thing, having private equity, getting into a space, improving efficiency. I don't think it's very good for the hospice space. And I'll give you just one example. We were shocked to find out there is a Medicare clause that specify bereavement care would be served to the bereaved for more than a year after the loss. So you know how those big skyscrapers in Tel Aviv that nobody knows the lobby is basically public property and everyone can use the lobby? Same thing. Anyone in Ohio can knock on the closest hospice door and say, I need support. I'm not well right now, and I could use some bereavement care. And the hospice, in the package it's getting from the government and taxpayer money, is supposed to provide value. They don't do that. And even when someone is a customer of theirs, so dad passed away, family is talking to the next of kin, pick up this stuff, whatnot, they don't make it very accessible. When they do, just to check the box on more than a year of bereavement care, many of them send 13 emails, so more than a year, once a month, to just show sympathy and words, which sympathy is nice, empathy is better. Like, you need to move from words to action. You need to actually do what the government is paying you to do, which actually help those people re-engage with life. And that is a huge gap that I was not aware of. And at the beginning, it looked like a really good opportunity for us to come in. But because it's such a wishy-washy part of CMS and Medicare, nobody's really enforcing it right now. It's probably going to change at some point. CMS is usually very strict. But this is a weird part of the industry.
Have you had to go and actually push for policy changes? Like, are you also taking action on governmental side of things?
We have one moonshot that is operating in those government areas. We think bereavement leave policy in the US is much needed. For example, In many places of the world, it's much more structured. Most places in the US right now would need to get back to work after 3 days. Doesn't make any sense. You're definitely not able to get back and bring your whole self back to work within 3 days of losing a close loved one. Not to mention an average of 420 hours it takes to wind down the affairs with 13 months a median just to process the estate. So, and that is decoupled from grief that has no timeline basically. And just to expect people to do that, that's one thing eventually would love to get more alignment on. The Veteran Administration Department is another one. And of course, CMS. So we're doing some of that, but that's a big company move. We're still at a very early stage, building our revenue engines and creating the category, because from an employee benefit standpoint, people talk about maternity, people talk about fertility benefits, people speak about caregiving benefits, but bereavement care is still basically new. It's the exact same thing. If you ask me, it's a life event, just like a newborn that happens in my own private, intimate house. And now I can't show up to work just the same way because I have a new situation in my life. So I need some short-term slack in order to fulfill my long-term commitment with you as a Google or a Facebook or an Apple who I work with. And bereavement is no difference. There's a life transition in the family. I now have this mix of emotional and practical needs. And I need some short-term support in order to fulfill that long-term commitment.
Do you define yourself as category defining or category creating? And if so, just because we're really out of time, even though I can sit and chat with you about this for forever. And if so, we're going to kind of close off with a few last questions, but let's focus advice also in that you might have for other founders about being category defining, and how to go about building something that is in a space that you probably need so much education about, even as your first steps.
Well, I think it's good practice to define yourself as a category defining company, especially not in an early stage, as an early stage startup. Very high risk of being immodest. However, this is a new category in many ways, and we're not correcting people when they say, oh, here's an award for digital health innovation, or here's a wellness award for a winning wellness app, or a fintech company. That confusion alone shows that we're not neither of those. Healthcare companies are obsessed with ensuring more length of life. We're not remotely close to that space. We're helping the bereaved. Fintech companies are usually not including pastel colors and compassionate content. Like, we're trying to uplift people. Yes, we help them figure out taxes and pre-fill things for the probate and help with benefits and money, but because it's a part of winding down the affairs. So, and we don't like words like dev tech or whatnot. we just don't get it, because again, that's not what we're solving for. Death is here. It's not something anyone is trying to fix. Loss is a big problem. It's a big taboo topic that needs more understanding. And we have a lot to do there in spotlighting the true implications of loss, the employer cost, the financial cost, the emotional cost, what we can do better as individuals, what we can do better as a society. So in that sense, it is a new category, but at some point others will join, and we're hoping to lead the way.
Fantastic. Let's kind of wrap this up. You know, you're in Series A at this point, you've raised?
Yep. We are post Series A.
Can you explain me a little bit about your investment journey? Why Entrée? Where, what do you think? What did you think about when, I think it would be accepting investors into your idea? What were your thoughts?
So I know Avi for many years and had the pleasure of doing several early stage investment as an angel with Avi and alongside Avi, usually the lead. And Entrée is all about kind of doing the impossible and taking a different approach. So we were very happy to see the interest from Entrée and others, and eventually go with Entrée on this very meaningful and long-term relationship where that's kind of the type of fund you can call when you need something and kind of go back and do your thing when you're focusing on operation. So you always feel like there's another team member by your side, and Avi for us is exactly that, an extension of the team.
And to close it off, do you have any, you're here inspiring people with your company and your app. Do you have any things that have inspired you? Any books, podcasts, movies, anything that you look for inspiration?
Usually inspiration finds me. So like I watch something or read something and I'm inspired by it. I never feel like I'm lacking inspiration. Maybe have too many cycles of that I kind of try to unwind, and then I get inspired even more by something. And the last time that happened, probably pretty cheesy and not sure it's as new to many of our listeners, but what was the name of the Michael Jordan Netflix, the last game? So something
I don't remember either.
Like,
hold on.
The story, it's Michael Jordan, he's the best, he's the GOAT, but watching this, such a great production, it's so inspiring and so motivating, and to see how laser focused someone could be on a target. And when you watch that, even if you usually work very late and you have a lot of cycles, you watch that and you feel like, I'm not doing enough. I can do so much more. I can go so much faster. So probably cheesy as it gets to point at Jordan and say he's a big deal. But for me, that's a recent time where I felt really inspired and specifically motivated. Like, okay, like tomorrow is going to be even better.
There we go. Yeah, The Last Dance. I just looked it up.
The Last Dance.
I remember saying that. Yeah, it was really beautiful. Definitely inspirational. We're wrapping it up here. Any last things that you want to add, or you good to go?
I'd say for the early stage founders watching us, and definitely the aspiring founders, I see a great momentum in Tel Aviv and Israel in general about mission-driven companies. And if there's one thing I'd love to see more of, not that cyber companies and DevOps companies are not good. They're amazing. They're building a crazy industry here, creating a lot of value. I think it's a great sign and a signal of strength that we see more purposeful ventures trying to do something that is adding value to the world and at the same time creating value. So I'm hoping this momentum will continue.
Thank you. That is a perfect place to end. Ron, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Have a good one.
Oh, thank you.